Welcome to this week's episode of Reverence for Reverie, where we blur the lines between science and soul. I'm Marissa, your host, and I'm grateful to have you along for this journey today. Before we dive into today's episode, I have something exciting to share. I've just launched the Reverie Collective Journal on Substack, and this will be a space for deeper reflections, personal musings, and extended explorations of some of the themes that we'll be discussing here on the podcast. So if you're loving these conversations and want to journey further, I'd love for you to join me there. You can subscribe at the reveriecollectivejournal.substack.com to be part of the unfolding dialogue. I'll link that in the show notes as well for easy access. For now, let's get started. There's a common belief in Western thought that the mind and body are separate, that our thoughts and emotions exist in one realm, while our physical health belongs to another. But if you've ever felt your stomach twist in anxiety, your chest tighten in grief, or your shoulders tense in stress, you know that's simply not true. We've all felt this, whether it's the knot of tension gripping our neck, or the way heartbreak can feel like a literal ache in our chest. These sensations aren't just metaphors. They're messages from our bodies, revealing the deeper connection between our inner and outer worlds. The reality is that the mind and body are not separate at all. They exist in constant dialogue, shaping each other, influencing each other, and, perhaps most profoundly, storing each other's experiences. This relationship is known as the Psyche-Soma connection, the intricate web where our emotions, our traumas, and even our ancestral wounds live in the body. So if the body holds our emotions, what does that really mean for our health, our well-being, even our sense of self? Can trauma be inherited? Can emotions shape our DNA? And if the body keeps the score, how do we finally rewrite the story? Today, we'll be exploring these questions through three powerful lenses. The first is epigenetics, the science that reveals how trauma and environment influence our genes. The second lens is the Psyche-Soma connection, the way our emotions manifest physically through our body. And the final lens is the Chakra system, an ancient map that shows where different traumas and emotions reside in the body, as explored in Anodea Judith's book, Eastern Body, Western Mind. And as we wrap up, we'll end with a reflection, an invitation to listen to your body, to notice what's there, and perhaps to begin the process of release. So let's get started. For decades, we thought of our genes as a rigid blueprint, fixed and inherited without room for change. But modern science has revealed something far more dynamic. Our genetic expression is constantly responding to the environment, our emotions, and even the lived experiences of those who came before us. Epigenetics, the study of how environmental factors influence gene expression, reveals that our genes are not destiny. Rather, they're like a piano, with each key representing a potential trait, response, or tendency. The notes exist, but the way the song is played, like what is activated or what remains silent, is shaped by experience. This means that trauma is not confined to a single lifetime. It can imprint itself biologically, altering the way our bodies regulate stress, process emotions, and respond to the world. One of the most well-documented studies on this phenomenon examined these descendants of Holocaust survivors. Researchers found that the children and even grandchildren of those who endured the horrors of war carried genetic markers indicating heightened stress responses. Their nervous systems seemed to have inherited the memory of suffering, priming them for higher levels of anxiety and emotional reactivity. Another study, the Dutch Hunger-Winter Study, examined children born to pregnant mothers who lived through famine in the Netherlands during World War II. Decades later, these children exhibited higher rates of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. The stress of scarcity had left an imprint, altering the way their bodies metabolized food, preparing them for a world of famine, even if they were later raised in abundance. In other words, their bodies, shaped by ancestral memory of scarcity, adapted by storing fat and conserving energy, even when food became plentiful. And it's not just war and famine that leave epigenetic marks. Chronic stress, emotional neglect, and early life adversity can alter how our bodies regulate fear, process emotions, and even heal. When we experience prolonged stress, our bodies flood with cortisol, which over time can affect the immune system, reproductive health, even cognitive function. These adaptations may have helped our ancestors survive harsh conditions, but they can also contribute to anxiety disorders, autoimmune conditions, and inflammatory diseases in future generations. So with all of that in mind, it opens the door to an even deeper question. If trauma can be passed down, can healing be passed down too? Dr. Bruce Lipton, a stem cell biologist and pioneer in epigenetics, argues that while genes provide potential, it is our beliefs, thoughts, and emotional environment that actually determine how they are expressed. In his book, The Biology of Belief, Lipton explains, genes are blueprints, but epigenetics is the contractor that decides how these blueprints are expressed based on signals from our perceptions and environment. In other words, the way we think about and respond to our experiences has the power to change our biology. Lipton's research has shown that stress and negative emotions can trigger genetic changes, but so can positive emotions, mindfulness, and belief reprogramming. Essentially, genes act as a script, but how that script plays out depends on the signals the body receives. Stress, love, safety, or fear each sends biochemical messages that can either activate or suppress different genetic expressions. His work also highlights the placebo effect, where belief in healing leads to real physiological change, as proof that the mind has a direct impact on the body. I discussed this idea in the last episode as well, so be sure to take a listen to that one. The same mechanisms that allow trauma to be inherited can also allow healing and resilience to be inherited when we shift patterns of fear, stress, and self-limiting belief. While epigenetics is a relatively new field, many ancient traditions have long understood that the wounds of one generation can echo through the next. In mythology, we often find this idea reflected in the archetype of the wounded healer, a figure whose own suffering grants them the power to guide others through their pain. In Greek mythology, Chiron, the wise centaur, was wounded by an incurable arrow. Though he could not heal himself, his suffering became the source of his greatest wisdom, leading him to become a revered teacher of medicine and healing. And his suffering did not destroy him. It transformed him into a source of wisdom for others. This reflects a deep truth found in many shamanic and indigenous traditions, where healers are often those who have endured profound trials of their own. Through their own suffering, they gain the wisdom to guide others, breaking cycles of pain and offering restoration, not just for themselves, but for their communities. As I think of this, I'm reminded of the sayings, the medicine is in the poison, and what is in the way is the way. Similarly, many ancestral healing practices acknowledge that unresolved trauma can live within a family line, passed down not only through behaviors and learned beliefs, but also through the body itself. In other words, the unhealed wounds of our lineage live within us, waiting for acknowledgement. In African and indigenous traditions, ceremonies and rituals are often conducted not just for the personal healing, but to liberate the burdens of past generations. When one person in a family system does the work of releasing trauma, breaking cycles, and reclaiming wholeness, They believe it sends ripples both forward and backward in time. These practices recognize that healing is rarely an individual task. It is communal, spanning time and lineage. So if gene expression is like a piano, what song is your body playing? While yes, suffering can be inherited, so can healing. Just as stress and trauma alter gene expression, practices like meditation, breath work, gratitude practices, and deep emotional work, like in therapy, have been shown to promote genetic resilience. Studies suggest that mindfulness and stress reduction techniques can downregulate genes associated with inflammation and anxiety while enhancing those linked to longevity and cellular repair. But you might be asking, how on earth can healing be passed down? This isn't about magical thinking. It's about how the body, nervous system, and environment shape future generations. When we regulate our own stress, we change the biochemical signals that we send to our bodies. Chronic stress floods the system with cortisol, leading to inflammation and dysregulation, while practices that promote relaxation, as I mentioned, like deep breathing, meditation, even spending time in nature, lower cortisol and encourage the production of oxytocin and serotonin, chemicals linked to well-being and emotional balance. For example, a parent who learns to manage anxiety through mindfulness or therapy models a more regulated nervous system for their children, teaching them, both consciously and unconsciously, how to respond to stress. A mother who has healed her own early attachment wounds may, in turn, create a more stable and nurturing environment for her child, influencing not just their psychological well-being, but even their stress response at a biological level. In future episodes, I'll be discussing how I believe emotional intelligence is the new form of generational wealth, and these very principles form the foundation of that idea. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and that one in particular. For now, let's get back to our discussion. So studies on intergenerational trauma show that heightened stress responses can be inherited. But as I'm demonstrating, research also suggests that when individuals engage in practices that reduce stress and foster emotional resilience, they can shift these patterns, potentially altering the biochemical environment that future generations inherit. As it turns out, indigenous cultures have understood something deep and integral to our humanity all along, that healing is not just that individual act. It has ripple effects, influencing the emotional and physiological landscape of those who come after us. Rather than being at the mercy of what we've inherited, we hold the power to rewrite the script. And healing isn't just about the personal well-being. It's about shifting the patterns that we are passing forward. So what unspoken stories does your body carry? Are you unconsciously repeating inherited patterns of fear, scarcity, and trauma? Or are you choosing to rewrite the song, to play a new melody, one of healing and expansion? Understanding epigenetics gives us more than just a scientific explanation. It offers us an invitation to listen deeply, to honor what came before us, and to consciously shape what comes next. And this brings us to the Psyche-Soma connection, the bridge between our emotions and our physical health, and the ancient wisdom that has long mapped the way emotions live in the body. In Western medicine, emotions are often treated as something separate from the body, an abstract experience managed by the brain, while physical health remains the domain of biology. But if we really pay attention, we know that's not how emotions work. I mean, grief sits in the chest like a heavy stone. Anxiety knots the stomach up. Rage clenches the jaw and the fists. The body doesn't just experience emotions, it holds them. Eastern traditions have long understood this connection, mapping out the way emotional experiences imprint themselves into the body through the chakra system. a network of energy centers running along the spine. Each chakra is associated with specific physical, emotional, and psychological themes. And when trauma or emotional distress occurs, it often manifests in the body in predictable ways. Modern research supports this ancient wisdom. Studies in somatic psychology and neurobiology from researchers such as van der Kolk and Levine show that unresolved emotions are often stored in the nervous system, muscles, and fascia. Trauma in particular has a way of embedding itself into the body, shaping our posture, our breathing patterns, and even chronic health conditions. For a moment, let's think of the body as a library. Each physical sensation, tension, or ailment is like a book that holds the story of an experience that hasn't been fully processed. The chakra system gives us a map for interpreting these stored energies and understanding how our emotional history might be shaping our physical reality. So let's take a journey through the body, moving from the ground up, exploring how trauma, emotion, and energy are stored. We'll begin with the root chakra, or Muladhara. It's the foundation of our entire energy system. It is depicted as the color red, and it's located at the base of the spine. It governs our sense of safety, stability, and belonging in the world. Think of it as the roots of a tree. When strong, we feel grounded and secure. But when uprooted by trauma, instability, or inherited fears, that sense of security is replaced by chronic anxiety, hypervigilance, and a deep-seated fear that life is not safe. In her book, Eastern Body, Western Mind, Anadea Judith describes the root chakra as the energetic imprint of our earliest survival experiences. Psychoanalytically, this parallels our first attachment bonds, the foundation of how we learn to trust or distrust life itself. If a child experiences neglect, instability, or a lack of emotional attunement, their nervous system may internalize insecurity as a baseline state, a pattern that follows them into adulthood as financial fears, chronic stress, or difficulty feeling at home in their body. This stress doesn't just linger in the psyche, it is imprinting itself into the body. A few examples of how root chakra imbalances manifest physically are lower back pain and chronic tension. So a body locked in survival mode unconsciously is bracing against uncertainty. And this shows up in that tension in the muscles. Digestive issues like IBS or constipation. The colon is ruled by this chakra and constricts in response to prolonged fear or instability. And autoimmune disorders. Chronic stress can lead the immune system to overactivate, attacking the body instead of external threats. And here's where ancestral inheritance comes into play as well. Research in epigenetics, particularly from Dr. Rachel Yehuda, as I've just mentioned moments ago, has shown that trauma doesn't end with the individual. It's passed down through generations. Yehuda's studies on Holocaust survivors' descendants revealed that they carry genetic markers of heightened stress responses, as though their bodies still remember the suffering of those who came before them. This is such a significant discovery. It begins to paint the picture of just how susceptible we are to the unconsciously stored and transmitted experiences of our ancestors. Even so, Dr. Bruce Lipton, in his book, The Biology of Belief, challenges the idea that we're at the mercy of our genetic blueprint. He writes, "Genes do not control our lives. Our perceptions do. Change the way you perceive the world, and you can change the signals that activate your genes." This suggests that our root chakra imbalances, our inherited fears and survival instincts are not permanent. Just as trauma can be passed down, so can healing. For many of us, this feeling of deep-seated insecurity or inexplicable fear isn't only personal. It's ancestral, systemic, and deeply embedded in the nervous system. It's as if the body is saying, I do not feel safe here. Recognizing this can be a profound first step towards untangling the hidden forces that shape our sense of safety in the world. Now, let's move upward to the sacral chakra, the center of emotion, creativity, and pleasure. All right, so as we move upward, we arrive at the sacral chakra, Svadhisthana, shown as the color orange and located in the lower abdomen, just below the navel. If the root chakra represents our foundation and survival, then the sacral chakra is where we begin to move, feel, and create. This is the seat of emotion, pleasure, creativity, sensuality, and connection. It is where desire is born, where we learn to experience joy, and where we form intimate relationships. But what happens when the natural flow of emotion is disrupted? In her book, Anadea Judith describes the sacral chakra as the center of our right to feel and to want. It is here that we learn whether pleasure is safe, whether emotions are acceptable, and whether desire is something to be embraced or feared. In psychoanalytic terms, this closely parallels our early relational experiences with caregivers. How emotions were received, whether joy was encouraged or suppressed, and whether bodily autonomy was honored or controlled. When the sacral chakra is imbalanced due to early conditioning, trauma, or cultural shame, this can lead to a few different things. One might be emotional numbness or disconnection. It's a learned adaptation to environments where emotions were overwhelming, dismissed, or punished. Secondly, it might show up as sexual dysfunction or reproductive health struggles. So the sacral chakra governs the reproductive organs, meaning unprocessed trauma, especially sexual trauma, may manifest in disorders like polycystic ovarian syndrome, painful cycles, or pelvic tension. It can also show up as lower back pain and sacral instability. So the sacral area can store repressed grief, shame, and emotions that were never allowed to be fully expressed. And fear of intimacy or creative blockages. Since the sacral chakra is the center of both emotional vulnerability and creative flow, wounds here can lead to a deep fear of being seen or expressing one's true self. And again, this is where epigenetics and psychoanalysis begin to intersect. Dr. Bruce Lipton argues that our beliefs about emotions, pleasure, and self-expression shape not only our psychology, but also the gene expression. Your thoughts and perceptions control your biology, he says, which means that inherited emotional patterns can continue until they are consciously addressed and transformed. As Carl Jung famously stated, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Yet, as we're beginning to understand, many of these patterns are inherited. Galit Atlas explores how unresolved trauma does not disappear. It is passed down, often in unconscious ways, in her book, Emotional Inheritance. Just as hair color and height are inherited, so too are the emotional imprints of our ancestors. This is particularly relevant for the sacral chakra, where so much of what we struggle with, emotional repression, fear of pleasure, or creative inhibition, may not have started with us. For example, if a parent or grandparent experienced war, displacement, or sexual violence, their body may have learned to suppress joy, intimacy, and desire for safety's sake. If emotions were dangerous in past generations, they may have been buried, unspoken, and that silence can live on in our own bodies as an unconscious fear of fully expressing ourselves. The sacral chakra asks, what emotions, desires, or creative impulses have you buried? Not just by you, but also by those who came before you. Are you allowing yourself to feel? By reclaiming our right to feel, to express, and to experience pleasure, we begin the process of breaking generational cycles of repression and fear. All right, so let's keep moving upward to the solar plexus. It's the center of will, power, and self-definition. At the center of the abdomen, just above the navel, lies Manipura, the solar plexus chakra, the seat of personal power, confidence, and self-definition. Unsurprisingly, given the name solar plexus, this energy center is the color yellow, like the sun. This is the place where we decide who we are, what we stand for, and how we assert ourselves in the world. If the root chakra represents safety and the sacral chakra represents feeling, then the solar plexus is about acting. It's our ability to take up space, to say, I am, and to move forward with conviction. It is the fire that fuels us, the energy that transforms thought into action, intention into reality. But what happens when that fire is dimmed? According to Judith, chakra governs our right to act and to be an individual. If we grew up in environments where we were criticized, controlled, or constantly made to feel not enough, we may internalize a belief that we're powerless, that our voice doesn't matter, that taking up space is unsafe. This is deeply connected to psychoanalytic ideas around shame, autonomy, and formation of the self. For example, Freud's concept of the superego. This is the internalized voice of authority, shaping our sense of what's allowed or forbidden. If it's overly harsh, it can lead to chronic self-doubt and a loss of instinctual power. I also think of Winnicott's false self. When a child learns to suppress their true impulses in order to please caregivers, they may develop a false self, one that performs rather than authentically expresses. When our sense of personal power has been eroded by criticism, rigid control, or unpredictable environments, it can manifest as chronic self-doubt and imposter syndrome. So this persistent feeling of not being good enough no matter what we achieve, indecisiveness or difficulty setting boundaries. This is a fear of asserting oneself as though standing firm might lead to rejection or punishment. Perfectionism and overachievement. So this is the desperate attempt to earn worth through accomplishments rather than believing in inherent self-value. And then digestive disorders as well, IBS, ulcers, nausea. In Emotional Inheritance, Galit Atlas describes how unprocessed shame and suppressed autonomy often manifest in the gut, where we unconsciously digest not just food, but also experiences, expectations, and self-judgment. In many families, power is something that was historically denied or taken away, especially for those from marginalized communities, oppressed lineages, or backgrounds where speaking up was dangerous. Epigenetic research suggests that these patterns of submission or overcompensation are unconsciously inherited. For example, if an ancestor lived under strict societal or cultural oppression, their body may have learned that staying small was safer. If a family lineage carries a history of financial struggle or lack of agency, later generations may inherit a deep-seated fear of power and independence. If a parent was emotionally volatile, a child may have learned to stay silent, comply, to avoid confrontation, sacrificing their autonomy to maintain peace. The solar plexus chakra asks us, whose expectations, fears, or limitations have we swallowed? It's as if the body is saying, I cannot digest the weight of this self-doubt. Continuing upward, we arrive at the heart, the bridge between personal power and collective connection. At the center of the chest lies Anahata, the heart chakra. Shown as the color green, it is the meeting place between the earthly and the divine, the physical and the spiritual. It governs love, compassion, and our ability to connect with others, yes, but just as importantly with ourselves. This chakra is described as the energetic space where we experience both attachment and loss, intimacy and grief. It is the place where love expands and where heartbreak lingers, where we feel secure and open. Anahata allows us to give and receive love freely. But when we experience betrayal, abandonment, or deep loss, the heart center constricts, both emotionally and physically. It's no coincidence that we say someone died of a broken heart, or that we physically clutch our chest in moments of deep sorrow. Grief lives in the body. It shows up physically as psychosomatic tightness. So chronic heartbreak or relational trauma often manifests as tightness in the chest, shallow breathing, even asthma, the body's way of bracing against further pain. Heart conditions. Studies show that intense emotional distress increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. So sudden loss or ongoing relational stress can lead to higher inflammation, arrhythmias, and even stress-induced cardiomyopathy, known as broken heart syndrome. It can also show up as shoulder and upper back pain. Unprocessed emotional burdens often settle in the body as tension, particularly in the shoulders, as if we're unconsciously carrying the weight of our grief. In psychoanalytic theories, this is understood as somatization, when the body expresses what the mind cannot fully process. Freud's early work on conversion symptoms explored how unresolved emotions could find their way into the physical realm, an idea expanded by thinkers like Wilhelm Reich, who examined how repressed emotions manifest as muscular arm burning in the body. Our capacity to love and trust is often shaped very early in life. Attachment theory, as developed by Bowlby and Ainsworth, suggests that when a child experiences consistent love and emotional attunement, they develop a secure attachment style, allowing them to form relationships rooted in trust and openness. But, as is very often, when love is inconsistent, painful, or conditioned on performance, the heart center can become a battleground of longing and fear. I'll give a short rundown of attachment styles. You can find these in a lot of other places, so if you'd like me to expand on them from an analytic standpoint, I certainly can. Avoidant attachment style. This is where, in terms of the heart chakra at least, unconsciously walls off their heart, fearing that closeness would lead to hurt. They might struggle with intimacy, keeping people at arm's length to avoid potential pain. Anxious attachment. So the fear of abandonment becomes overwhelming, leading to clinginess, overgiving, or losing oneself in relationships. All of these are attempts to keep love from slipping away. And disorganized attachment. When love and pain are deeply entangled, often in trauma, the heart center may oscillate between craving connection and fearing it, making relationships feel chaotic and unpredictable. So going back to the book, Emotional Inheritance, Atlas explores how the grief, betrayals, and unresolved love stories of past generations don't simply disappear. They imprint themselves on how we relate to others, how we fear loss, and how we unconsciously repeat patterns of connection and disconnection. For example, a woman who never allows herself to fully love may be unconsciously repeating the survival strategy of a grandmother who lost her great love in war without recognizing it. A man who sabotages his relationships may be carrying the unresolved grief of a mother who never got to heal from her own heartbreak. When the heart chakra is blocked, love, whether romantic, familial, or even self-love, can feel like a risk, a burden, or something that needs to be earned rather than freely received. But in its full expression, the heart chakra reminds us that love is not just about relationships with others. It is the foundation of how we relate to life itself. It's the ability to sit with our own hearts, to honor what they've carried, and to allow them, once again, to open. All right, so as we continue upward, we move towards the throat, the center of truth, expression, and the unspoken words that shape our reality. At the base of the throat lies Vishuddha, the throat chakra represented by the color blue, the energetic center of self-expression, truth, and communication. This is the chakra that governs not just our ability to speak, but to be heard. It is the seat of our voice, our authenticity, and the stories we tell, both to ourselves and the world. Anodea Judith describes Vishuddha as the bridge between our inner world and outer expression. When this energy center is open, we speak with clarity, confidence, and honesty. But when early experiences teach us that our voice doesn't matter, that our truth is dangerous, or that silence is safer than speaking up, this chakra contracts. Many of us learn, often unconsciously, to suppress our voice as a survival mechanism. For example, children raised in authoritarian households may internalize the belief that speaking up leads to punishment. Those who grew up with emotionally unavailable caregivers may feel that expressing their emotions is futile, so they swallow their feelings instead. And people who endured gaslighting or manipulation may doubt their own perceptions, leading to hesitation in speaking their truth for fear of being invalidated. Over time, this suppression doesn't just stay in the mind. Again, it imprints on the body and the nervous system. Chronic throat tightness, difficulty swallowing, or even an inexplicable lump in the throat sensation can signal unspoken words, repressed emotions, or fear of saying what needs to be said. Other ways a blockage in this center may manifest are chronic sore throats or thyroid imbalances. So the long-term suppression of emotions, particularly anger or sadness, can manifest in the throat as inflammation or endocrine imbalances. Jaw tension and TMJ disorder. Clenching the jaw can be a physical response to holding back words or emotions. Dizziness or feeling faint when speaking. For those with severe throat chakra imbalances, public speaking or difficult conversations can trigger a physiological flight or fight response, leading to rapid heartbeat, dizziness, or difficulty breathing. In analysis, this repression is linked to the concept of inhibition, the unconscious restriction of impulses due to fear of consequence, rejection, or abandonment. A child who repeatedly receives the message, "Be quiet," or "Don't say that," doesn't just learn to censor their speech. They internalize the belief that their thoughts and emotions are wrong. A balanced throat chakra allows for authenticity, clarity, and self-trust. When this center is open, we speak without fear, without shrinking, and without needing to prove ourselves. The body asks us, are you speaking your truth, or are you silencing yourself? Yet, healing this space isn't just about learning to be louder. It's about reclaiming the belief that your voice matters. As we continue upward, we enter the realm of intuition and inner knowing. The third eye chakra, the center of perception beyond the visible. Sitting between the eyebrows, Ajna, the third eye chakra, governs intuition, perception, and inner wisdom. It is the seat of insight, represented as the color indigo or dark blue, allowing us to see beyond the surface and into the deeper patterns of life. The third eye is described as our center of inner knowing, the place where rational thought and intuitive wisdom converge. When this energy center is open, we feel a clear sense of direction in life, a trust in our instincts, and an ability to perceive beyond the literal and into the symbolic. But what happens when this chakra is blocked? Self-doubt, confusion, and disconnection from our intuition can take hold. We may become overly reliant on external validation, disconnected from our inner guidance, or unable to trust our own experiences. The third eye doesn't just represent vision in a metaphorical sense. It is deeply tied to our actual neurological and endocrine functions. For example, a disrupted third eye chakra may appear as headaches, migraines, and eye strain. Those who are mentally overactive, constantly analyzing, worrying, or doubting their own instincts may experience tension in the forehead and around the eyes. sleep disturbances, and vivid dreams. The third eye is closely linked to the pineal gland, which regulates melatonin production. Disruptions in this chakra can manifest as insomnia, restless sleep, or intense symbolic dreams. Cognitive fog and indecisiveness. So, difficulty concentrating, making decisions, or discerning truth from illusion may indicate an energetic disconnection from one's intuitive faculties. Psychoanalytic theory offers a fascinating lens through which to view third eye imbalances, especially through the work of Carl Jung. Jung described intuition as a deep, unconscious function of the psyche, a form of knowing that operates outside of logic, often through symbols, archetypes, and dreams. Yet in Western thought, rationality is often prioritized over intuition. From childhood, many of us are taught to dismiss our instincts in favor of logic, social conditioning, or external authority. If a child frequently perceives something, perhaps sensing tension in their home, intuiting an unspoken truth, or picking up on subtle emotional cues, but is then subsequently told, "That's not true," or "You're imagining things," they may learn to distrust their own perception. Over time, this can create a split, a disconnection from their inner knowing. One way this experience might be described is the rejection of primary process thinking, the symbolic, imaginal way of knowing that is more fluid and dreamlike. To bring us back to the very name of this podcast, it is the state of reverie. In our hyper-rational world, the third eye's way of perceiving through synchronicity, dreams, or gut feelings is often dismissed as irrational or unscientific. Yet, both Jung and Freud viewed dreams and intuition as key pathways to understanding the unconscious. A balanced third eye chakra allows us to see with clarity, not just physically, but metaphorically. It grants access to insight, intuition, and a deep trust in our own perception. Healing this center isn't about abandoning logic. It's about restoring the balance between intellect and intuition. It's about reclaiming our right to see the truth beyond the surface, to trust what our body and mind are telling us, and to perceive the world not only through facts, but through wisdom. As we ascend to the final chakra, we arrive at the crown, the gateway to universal consciousness. At the very top of the head, depicted as the color purple, is the crown chakra. Sahasrara represents our connection to something greater than ourselves, whether that be divine intelligence, universal consciousness, or the vast mystery of existence itself. The crown chakra is often described as the seat of enlightenment, where the illusion of separateness dissolves and we experience unity with all that is. It governs spiritual insight, wisdom, and the capacity to surrender to something beyond the ego. When this energy center is balanced, we feel a deep sense of meaning, openness, and connection to the greater flow of life. We trust that we are part of something vast and infinite, and we embrace both the unknown and the interconnectedness of all things. Since the crown chakra governs consciousness itself, disruptions here can show up in both an over-identification with the material world or, conversely, excessive detachment from it. A few ways this can show up are, first, disconnection, cynicism, or spiritual skepticism. So when this chakra is blocked, we may feel lost, directionless, or unable to see a greater purpose in life. There may be a tendency towards nihilism, depression, or feeling existentially cut off from a sense of belonging. It can also show up as intellectual arrogance or rigid thinking. On the flip side, an overactive crown chakra can manifest as a hyper-rational mindset that dismisses intuition, spirituality, or anything that cannot be measured and categorized. There is a tendency to over-intellectualize experience rather than engaging with life in a more embodied and present way. Also, dissociation or spiritual bypassing. In some cases, an imbalanced crown chakra can lead to escapism, avoidance of the body, or using spirituality to bypass unresolved trauma. This can look like rejecting earthly existence in favor of abstract enlightenment pursuits, or neglecting personal emotional work under the guise of being somehow above human struggles. From an analytic perspective, the crown chakra represents the strengthening of the ego. And I want to pause here for a moment, because often we hear more about the need to rid ourselves of the ego or dissolve it somehow. Yet a healthy and strengthened ego is actually what we're going for. Ego strength offers us flexibility and the ability to step beyond our personal narratives and experience a greater, more expansive awareness. Conversely, the weakened ego is what gets in the way, showing up as pride, shame, and rigidity. Carl Jung's concept of individuation is deeply relevant here. He argued that true psychological wholeness requires integrating the unconscious, bringing awareness to the parts of ourselves that we have disowned or repressed. This process is not about rejecting the ego, but transcending its limitations, allowing us to step beyond rigid self-definitions and into a greater, more flexible and fluid sense of being. Jung also spoke of the self as a transcendent force, the totality of who we are beyond just the conscious mind. Many mystical traditions echo this, suggesting that awakening the crown chakra is not about escaping reality, but about fully embodying it, seeing through the illusion of separateness and recognizing our deep connection to everything. Unlike the lower chakras, which focus on survival, relationships, and personal identity, the crown chakra invites us to surrender, to release control, to trust in something larger than ourselves, and to embrace the unknown. It reminds us, you are more than just a body. You are a soul experiencing itself through form. A balanced crown chakra does not mean that we must have all of the answers. It actually means we're at peace with not knowing. We move through life with reverence, curiosity, and the understanding that, at the deepest level, we are part of something infinite. All right, so we've traveled through the body, tracing the way our emotions, experiences, and even our ancestral stories live within us. From the root, where we carry survival instincts passed down through generations, to the crown, where we touch the vastness of universal consciousness, we are reminded that we are not separate from our history, nor from the energy that flows through all things. What we inherit is not just our DNA. It is the way that we hold our breath when we're afraid, the way our shoulders tense under the weight of unspoken burdens, the way our hearts either open to love or brace against it. But if pain and fear can be passed down, so can healing. Each chakra, each energy center, is an opportunity to reclaim something, a sense of safety, a right to feel, a voice, a purpose, a connection to the divine. The body remembers, but it also has the capacity to release, to transform, to alchemize what was once a wound into wisdom. So as we close this conversation, I invite you to tune into your body, to notice where energy feels stuck, where emotion lingers, where silence has taken the place of expression. What stories does your body carry? What patterns are ready to be rewritten? This is just the beginning of the dialogue. If any part of this journey has resonated with you, let's continue exploring together. Perhaps in future episodes, we'll take a deeper dive into the individual chakras, uncovering more of the unconscious layers that shape us. Please let me know if that's something you'd like to explore further. Until then, honor what your body holds, honor what it is ready to release, and most of all, trust in your own unfolding. If today's episode was interesting to you, make sure to subscribe to the Reverie Collective Journal for more reflections and behind-the-scene insights. You can find the link in the show notes or visit the reveriecollectivejournal.substack.com. I'd love to continue this conversation with you there. And feel free to share your reflections with me on Instagram at reverie_the collective or at reveriecollectiveteam@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for being here, for being curious, and as always, let the reverie lead you.